In this video, I'm going to show you how I go about using vocal effects in music production. Before we get into the technical aspects, I want to talk about the most crucial element, defining your taste as an artist. When you're creating music, it's a lot like cooking, especially in the mixing phase. Just like how you have a food palette, you've got a musical palette. And the effects and processing you use on your vocals are like spices, seasonings, or sauces that can either help shape the flavor of your song or make you wish you just ordered some Domino's and called it a day. A problem a lot of really talented but directionless artists have is that they haven't done the work to know what actually resonates with them. They might listen intently to lyrics or whatever their instrument is, which is important, but not truly listen to the other instrumentation or sonics of the song. So when they go to record their own song, they have no idea what direction to go in. This doesn't mean an artist has to know the technicality of what they like, but they do need to be able to point out what elements connect with them and what don't. With food, I know I'm not gonna like a cucumber salad because I don't like cucumber and I never have. The salad in this analogy being the song and the cucumber being a main ingredient. But I do like salads and I like pickled cucumbers, so it's the context in which they are presented that determines if I like it or not. Most people know exactly the foods they like and don't like, and to an extent, why. A good way to get more clarity here is listen to the music that really moves you and pay attention to all the elements in the song. Take note on the characteristics of the vocals. Are they bright and airy sounding, or are they kind of dark and distant? What is it about the sound of the vocals that gets you pumped or brings tears to your eyes? How about the guitars, the drums? How does it make you feel emotionally? What does it remind you of? Then do the same thing with music you don't like. And even better, if it's a genre you tend to listen to but don't like the artist, even though they're popular. Meaning it's not necessarily a quality issue. What is it about their music that you just aren't feeling? No need to get technical here. Technically, I don't know why I don't like cucumber. I just know I don't like it. Maybe you're a texture person and creamy foods make you gag. No judgment, weirdo. Once you've defined your taste, then you've got a palette to work with. You can take individual ingredients from different genres and use them in a tasteful way unique to you. The key is figuring out what works for you and what complements the mood you're trying to create. Now, assuming you've got a vocal comp you're really happy with and you've already done any necessary tuning and editing, you'll want to start with some EQ and compression. Here's the dry vocal.
In my car for the last ride.
This song was tracked with a Gage ECM87 modeling mic, and I use this mic clone plugin that comes with it on the C12 setting, which models an AKG C12 mic. With that, you'll notice it's a little bit brighter and more present. You'll also see I've got a tiny bit of dynamic EQ taming the low mid here.
In my car for the last ride.
After that, I've got the Slate Digital FG73, which models a Neve 1073 preamp. Because we use the modeling mic, I needed to record through a very clean preamp for it to work properly. But colorful, harmonically rich preamps are really cool to record through. So by putting this after the mic clone plugin, it gives me the ability to simulate recording through the preamp. It's a pretty subtle effect, but if you dial up the drive, you'll hear a more obvious distorted effect.
In my car for the last ride. In my car for the last ride.
It's always a good idea to start out with some extreme settings so you train your ear to hear what this plugin sounds like. Otherwise, you're likely adding plugins because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Now, personally, I like to EQ before the compressors, but some people like to compress first. Both ways can work. Try out both and see what works for you. Next, I've got a couple EQs I'm using in Serial. They each have their own characteristics that I like, so I use both subtly to shape the tone. I'm adding some top end with the Moog EQ4's Airband and upper mid shelf and dipping out some of the low mids.
In my car for the last ride.
Then with the UAD 1073, I'm dipping out some more low mids at 360 Hertz. But keep in mind, it's a pretty broadband EQ, so it's taking out a pretty big chunk around 360 as well. To make up for that, I am boosting a 220 Hertz low shelf here and high pass filtering at 80 hertz, also boosting the 10K top shelf just a touch. It sounds slightly different than the Moog EQ, and I like both.
In my car for the last ride.
Next, I'm using the PreSonus FET Comp, which is an 1176 style FET compressor. This is a fast compressor, and I like to use the slowest attack and fastest release. Probably the most common settings you'll see for 1176 on vocals. Compressing maybe -7 to -10 dB at the most on peaks. That'll differ from song to song.
In my car for the last ride.
After that, I used the UAD LA2A, which is a much slower optical compressor that kind of smooths it out a bit more. Neither compressor is working too hard, so you won't notice any pumping or any other artifacts.
In my car for the last ride.
At the end of this part of the chain, I've got the soft tube tape. I really like the subtle saturation on this plugin. You can add a little more top end in, as well as dial in the mix knob to taste.
In my car for the last ride.
A great way to add creative effects is to add them in parallel using sends and returns. In Studio One, returns are called effects channels, but sends are still called sends, and they do exactly what you think a send would do. It sends whatever amount of the signal you specify to the effects track or return where your delay, reverb, or whatever effects is. I much prefer this method over using inserts for these kind of effects because I like to stack plugins in parallel and be able to use automation effectively. First up, I have some parallel saturation going on with the Vertigo VSM3. This plugin is a lot of fun and can get you subtle saturation all the way up to full-on distortion. You can play with the settings so you're saturating the harmonic frequency range you like.
In my car for the last ride.
Next up is a super short 30-second note stereo tape delay. You might use the high and low cut filters to fit your particular song. I left them alone for this song and I put a distortion plugin in front of it where I'm already doing some tone shaping.
In my car for the last ride.
Next up, I've got a 16th note mono tape delay, which is just giving a little more front to back depth. I'll use the high and low cut filters here and set the repeats, echo volume, and recording volume, which is just the input gain, to whatever sounds right for the song.
In my car for the last ride.
With Valhalla Freak Echo, we've got a stereo 8th note delay that is also slightly detuned. It brings a lot of movement and atmosphere and is a free plugin, so you should definitely go grab it.
In my car for the last ride.
Now for a reverb, I'm using another one of my favorites from Valhalla, Shimmer. You wouldn't necessarily think of this reverb or this setting as your first choice for a vocal reverb, but that's where your own taste and creativity come in. Try stuff out and you might stumble upon something really cool, or it might be awful and ruin your song, and then you'll know your father was right all along about you.
In my car for the last ride.
After that, I've added Soundtoys Tremolator for a Billie Eilish type effect. I've cut the lows and boosted a high shelf around 1K, so it's mostly affecting the upper mids and top end.
In my car for the last ride.
And you'll see a little dynamic EQ up around 9, 10K for some de-essing. You want to make sure your effects are de-essed. One more effect for the lead vocal I used was Little Altar Boy for an octave down vocoder type sound. And I actually put that before the EQ and compression chain. I also EQ'd that so it wasn't full spectrum. I just want it filling a tiny spot connecting the vocal to the instrumental. It's very noticeable in solo, but pretty subtle in context.
In my car for the last ride.
In creating the vocal layers and harmonies, we are painting a tonal picture. I want the listener to close their eyes and be able to imagine they are in a scene in a movie. I like that movie scene to relate to the lyrics as much as possible. With the chorus lyric being "in my car for the last ride," I want to paint that picture for the listener. I don't want to hit them over the head with a sample of a literal car zooming down the road, although if your song calls for it, by all means throw that Fast and Furious sample in there. We've got the lead vocal doubled and tripled, then panned hard left and right. The harmonies have a similar approach, except panned a little narrower in some cases. Let's take a listen to these backing vocals.
In my car for the last ride.
I felt like a vocoder effect would be cool on these as well, so I duplicated them all and added the same effects chain, plus Little Altar Boy an octave down on some and an octave up on others, as well as that same tremolator effect we used on the lead vocal. What I like to do is I'll create the effect on one of the channels in the insert section, then drag that down to the event effects section in the bottom left of the inspector window. After disabling the insert effects, I'll render the event effects. Effects plugins can often be quite CPU intensive, so this will save a lot of processing power. Plus it simplifies things for me and I won't accidentally mess up the settings. Then I'll repeat that process on all the other tracks I want to apply the same effect to, and I'll tweak those to taste on the individual tracks.
In my car, the last ride.
I have the UAD Lexicon 224 on a vocal plate setting with the pre-delay set to be in time with the tempo of the song, and this width knob after so it's a bit narrower. I don't want the backing vocal reverb super wide. Then let's add in those same delays and reverbs we're using on the lead vocal and add another, the stock analog delay from PreSonus. Yet another tape delay, but it's got some cool modulation features the others don't. Adding some length and surreality.
In my car, the last ride. In my car, for the last ride.
Finally, once all the effects are in, I'm noticing that there's definitely too much low end, so I'm gonna filter some more out on the all vocals bus, which is where I'm sending all the vocals and all the vocal effects, so I have final control over them with one fader and any overall EQ needed. I had one EQ with a low cut around 100 already in the place earlier in the mix, but after all the effects were in, I needed a bit more, so I just added a low cut with Pro Q here at 111. Don't focus on the exact frequencies I'm cutting at. It will be different for every song. You'll have to learn to use your ears, as only the most helpful commenters in audio groups will tell you. I'll find the spot where the vocals are no longer stuck in the mud, masking the guitars and the bass, but don't sound too thin or small.
In my car, for the last ride.
And that brings us to the final step, automation. This is an incredibly powerful and important step in making the vocals fit into the context of different sections of the mix, even down to specific lyrics. Without automation, the effects can sound really cartoonish and out of place. We've all heard the sound guy at the open mic who adds way too much reverb or delay, and it sounds like the singer is drowning in an underwater cave. Typical things I'm automating are volume, send levels, send mutes. You can automate just about everything. As you can see here, I've got several automation lanes set up. For example, I'm automating the send levels for the reverbs and delays, muting effects like the tremolo and bringing it in specifically for the chorus, and even automating the mix knob on the tape. You can also automate the effects channels and the parameters on those effects. I've automated the drive on Little Altar Boy to go from a subtle effect in the verses to a much more prominent effect in the chorus. On the Vertigo VSM3 track, I've automated the volume to come up during the choruses as well to make the choruses louder and more saturated, giving the choruses a grittier, thicker sound than the softer, more sparse verses. One of the reasons for that is there are a lot of instrumental layers that come in during the chorus that would drown the vocals out if I left them at the same volume and effects levels as they are in the verses. Delay throws are another example of a useful way to use automation. Here I'm emphasizing the phrase "the last ride" by automating delay and reverb throws to add some length to it. The tricky part is you really don't want to get the consonants. You only want the vowels. Otherwise it sounds like a repeated phrase instead of just extending it, or you'll get hard consonants blurring up the mix and making it really messy.
For the last ride.
Choosing the right effects for your song is entirely up to your taste and what's right for the genre. So if you haven't defined your taste, now is a good time to do it. Become an active listener. Go listen to the music you love and the music you don't and take notes. What do you hear that makes you feel a certain way? Write it down. Again, it doesn't have to be super technical. Just use emotive descriptors if you like. I want to know how you're using creative vocal effects and what some of your favorites are. Let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for another in-depth video on vocal layering, I've got one of those linked right up here, as well as the lyric video for the song I used here. I'll see you in the next video where I'll be doing a deep dive on Larry the Cucumber and how a cartoon changed my relationship with one particular food forever.